My name's Corey Anderson. I'm with the WhyTry program. I am excited to be here, and I am the moderator for today's webinar. I just want to share a little bit about my background, and then I have some panelists, some awesome guests that are joining us for the webinar today that I'm going to introduce, and then we'll get started. So as I said, my name is Corey Anderson. I am currently in Utah. I'm from Utah, and here I have been working in education since 2001. I started off working as a paraprofessional, working with ELL kids, and I loved it so much that I changed my major and went straight into education and became a teacher. And I taught in a classroom for 5 years, and then after that I entered administration and worked in both secondary and elementary as an assistant and as a head principal for 11 years. And then just last summer I joined WhyTry. And that's been an adventure, and I've loved every second of it. And now I get to fly around the country and join and meet lots of educators from different organizations. And it's been awesome because I get to see not only are there a lot of challenges that people are working through that are different, but it's really been exciting to see how much we have in common in terms of the things that we're trying to work through and deal with, as well as just this innate desire to help build our future through the youth, right? And it's just this common thread that permeates educators from one coast to the other. And it's really cool to see that and be a part of that and to work with them. So I'm excited to be here now and to moderate this discussion. We have 3 panelists that are excellent. I'm actually going to stop sharing this window so that we can better see that frame. Let me get there. Fantastic. Okay, so I have 3 guests with us today, and I want to introduce them to you. The first one is Scott Seaman. Scott is the president of the Association for the Washington School Principals. He's been a teacher, he's been a coach, he's been a principal for 19 years, and he spent 12 of those years as a head principal at Tumwater High School. And so we're excited for Scott to be with us. His most recent work has been with the Association for Washington School Principals. Scott, is there anything else you'd like to share about yourself or say as in way of introduction?
No, other than probably my favorite years were my time as an assistant principal, where I was really in the weeds with the kids who needed a loving, caring adult the most. So I just want to make sure that I got the shout out for the APs out there in the world.
Nice. Excellent. Now, Early King, you can see in the bottom right window, or is it the same for everybody? In my bottom right window. I'm not sure where it is positioned across the nation, but he is currently the principal at the Youth Connection Charter School in Chicago. And under his leadership, they are committed to providing youth through not just from ages 17 to 21 that is undercredited and overaged with academic learning beyond high school. Is that right? Did I get that right?
Correct. That's correct.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. He's also worked as a counselor for the Department of Child and Family Services, and he's received the Governor's Award in 2001 for helping turn around at-risk programs in Chicago. And then in 2009, he joined K-12 and was involved in online learning, which has become increasingly relevant for all of us today. And so he has awesome insights from that background as well as being an administrator currently. So Early, thank you for being here. Anything else you'd like to add?
No, that was perfect. Thanks for having me here.
Great. And then Dave Brotherson, he is here in Utah with me, and he is an award-winning teacher, an experienced administrator, and he is actually currently serving as the superintendent of Duchesne County Schools here in Utah. He is the former rural schools teacher of the year, the Farm Bureau teacher of the year, and is currently the Utah Rural Schools president. And so we are very fortunate to have a superintendent with us here to give us his insights for all the leaders across the country that are tuning in today. Dave, thanks for being here today.
You're welcome.
Anything
for the opportunity.
Awesome. So the format today is I am going to be providing some questions for our participants, our panelists here to answer and hopefully give us some good insights and ideas heading into the upcoming school year. And I'm just going to throw a question out there and give them an opportunity to answer. For all of you who are out there listening, thank you for being here. There's a chat window where you are welcome to share your thoughts and even add some questions of your own that I'll look through. And if possible, we'll get to those. But where I want to begin is with this. As a former administrator, I know for a fact that balancing time between all of the different initiatives and responsibilities and duties, that's a key part of the job of trying to figure out that balance. And it's a very complicated part of the job. But now with all that's happened over the course of the last 3 years, I wonder from your perspective, how has that balance shifted? Or in other words, what should a school leader, whether they are the administrator or even just a teacher leader or another leader in the school, how should they be focusing for the upcoming school year in comparison to other years? What do you think? Who would like to start us off today?
The last 3 months, not the last 3 years, last 3 months.
Did I say last 3 years? I meant last 3 months. Thanks, Dave.
I think the biggest concern is safety and making sure that teachers and students are safe and in a safe environment. And after we get that taken care of, then we can go on to curriculum and benchmarks and standards.
Gotcha.
Yeah, for us, the biggest shift has been in the way that we plan for the year. So we are planning to go into stage 4 here in Chicago, which is not, stage 5 is when you can go back to normalcy. So stage 4, you can only have like 50 people in the building at one time. And with us, that is a challenge. So, logistically, we have to plan for how we get students in and how we have team members, staff throughout the building. So the planning process has changed a great deal. That's including the PD that we have. For the team that is not so versed at doing online learning, because what we're going to do is actually a blended type of learning, a 60-40 model, if you will. So we have to plan for those students being outside of the face-to-face model, working from home virtually. So the planning process is changing, and with that, professional development is going to happen, earlier in the year versus happening, in August. So we're going to have PD throughout the summer. Teachers usually resume or come back into the school in August. So we're going to actually do PD throughout the summer. And of course, we have to give stipends to teachers for coming in and working with us.
Gotcha. Anything you want to add, Scott?
Yeah, I would just throw in that, especially, our building leaders, they were turned into virtual principals overnight as schools shut down across the country. So they went from face-to-face daily interactions with kids and adults and having their pulse on the system to living in uncertainty for the last few months. And now we're planning for the fall, which is still uncertain in a lot of states because we don't know where they're going to be as far as phases are concerned from departments of health. So I think the biggest challenge for our leaders right now, when I say school leaders, I'm talking about all the adults who are sharing in a leadership role. The biggest challenge for them, I think, is being willing to embrace a new paradigm about what education looks like from the future. We have got to let go of what I would hate to even use the word traditional. We got to get rid of that thinking and use this as a huge opportunity to think about what's possible in this next new system that really meets the needs of all kids. And I think that's the biggest challenge for school leaders right now is let's not think of distance learning as that thing that we had to do, but it's what we're going to do. And it's going to be blended and flexible and be able to turn on a dime.
I like that. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I think this idea of being able to embrace, there's a lot of talk of, or there was a lot of talk of getting back to normal, but I think what you're hitting at is there's if you're thinking of getting back to where it used to be or how it used to be, it's probably not going to be there, right? We've got to look at it in a different way, but maybe not even look at it in a negative way, but embrace it and say, okay, so how can we make education, how can we take it to the next step, right? And early, it sounds like you have been using a virtual method of delivery with your career and profession for a number of years. So when all of this happened, what was your response? I mean, I know, as I think either Scott or Dave said, that we were turned into virtual principals overnight. And so for a lot of them, that increased anxiety and fear. Just like, oh, now what do I do? For you, how did you respond since you had more experience in a virtual, world than we did?
But the first thing was to actually keep the team calm and keep the parents calm. And then, pretty much let them know that, we had a plan, before we released everyone. So due to the fact that I work with K-12, which is, they have virtual schools, they have blended schools, and then they have some face-to-face models that they kind of manage. So I was actually working with 17 schools across the country, and through trial and error, trying to make this, remote learning thing happen and work well and really deliver with efficacy. I had some things that we already we built into the school, if you will. So we had some students already doing some online classes using the K-12 curriculum. So in that sense, teachers had some virtual training, but it wasn't fully, virtual, working from a Google Classroom per se. So we had to learn how to use Google and Google Hangout, Google Meet to actually, be really great with the students, to actually deliver a great lesson with the students in that setting. And then the students had to actually get some training in Google, because the platform that we used in the school was totally different. But Google was the cheapest way to do it. We didn't have the funds to actually scale it using the LMS that we use through K-12 to actually, use it for all the team members. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, because I was able to use the previous experience that I had with K-12, it was easy for us to logistically make that switch. The tough thing that we were faced with actually getting people familiar with the Google, platform and the tools that they use in Google. So we have some Google training that's coming up in the next 2 weeks or so for everyone. And that training is going to be ongoing for like the next 2 weeks. So probably for the first week of, into the first week of July. Mm. So, we kind of had a head start. I think the things that we're faced with is having the proper resources, because we are a small school. I have a size, 250 students, and, the budget is pretty thin. So what kind of platforms can we use? I know K-12 has some great platforms. We use Brightspace, which is a great platform to deliver. It's just like in the classroom, you can raise your hand. You can see the students interact. It was great. You have async, and then you have some synchronous sessions that you can have. So it was pretty good for all students. And, that's what we're trying to figure out right now, which platforms we're going to use going into the next year based on the budget that we have to our disposal.
Thank you. So I hear, you talking about this. It sounds like you're getting a lot of PD for your colleagues and teachers with regards to, online delivery. Let me ask, in terms of trying to be prepared for the needs that our students will have coming into the fall, and even, our colleagues, should our approach to social and emotional learning change from where it has been? Or do you feel like you were already headed down that path? What do you guys think? What do you think, Dave? Has all of this affected our approach to social and emotional learning?
I think social emotional learning needs to be right at the forefront. If you don't have a relationship with the student, let's go down to your elementary grades. If there's not a relationship with the teacher, they're not going to log on. They're going to find an excuse to play with their brother or their sister. But if they have some accountability to the teacher and have a relationship there, then they're going to at least try. And then if they're missing a chat session or a Zoom session, you know, the checkup on them, the communication with them individually. You know, typically a teacher hasn't been able to communicate, you know, via text or other means to an individual student that was kind of off limits. We've opened a lot of new doors, and I think that there needs to be a team there with the parents involved, where that you can communicate to that student and see why that they missed their Zoom session or why they weren't logged on that day, and maybe make some accountability with the parents of, you know, Trevin has a Zoom session today, you know, he didn't attend, you know, what was there a reason? And then make that accessible to them. We have several students in our teachers in our district that are posting all of those on different types of social media so that they can be viewed at a later time. And so if they did miss, they can go back and get that information and then ask individual questions through email and those type of things. There's a lot of questions that are coming in the chat about resources for students. And we have in our area, our internet provider, there's multiple internet providers, but the main landline internet provider has provided free internet during this 3 months. Now, as we go on to the future, for those that, you know, would come in and sign up that couldn't afford it, as we go into the future, I think that needs to be one of our priorities, is those relationships with, you know, not only our network provider, but, you know, what type of hardware we're going to use, what type of software we're going to use. Is it consistent through K-12? A lot of our parents have multiple kids in the system and multiple students. And as they have to learn 3 or 4 different, you know, Mastery Connect and Canvas, it's hard for a parent to keep up their professional development. As they grow in this system, we need to accommodate them as well. And if we can keep it to one platform that they have to learn and be able to branch out from there, it makes it a lot easier for a parent to be able to be a partner in this and help their kids to succeed.
Excellent. Thank you. Scott, early, same question. Should our approach to social and emotional learning change from where it has been in the past?
I'll let you go.
You want to jump in first?
Go ahead, Scott.
You're probably going to be sick of me by the time this call's over, because to me, this is like a pivotal opportunity for us as educators to rebuild the entire system. So CEL used to be that thing that districts might do, or they had a program, or, oh, this building does CEL and this building hasn't quite adopted it yet, or we're in the process of adopting it. To me, CEL should be what we do. It's the foundation of what we do. It's not a program. And as we look to build this new system, this new future for our kids and our families, it should be the foundation of what we do. We should rethink time. We should rethink space. And I'm seeing the chat there that, you know, how do you do that if you're trying to build relationships online? Well, we need to think differently through time. That means we might have to scale the day differently, have different teachers available during the day and during the evening so families and kids can connect physically, because we have to have that space for face-to-face relationships. But it is all about relationships, and we have traditionally shoved kids into our system, made them run the gauntlet, and then we've scratched our head wondering why we still have gaps. It's time. Sorry, early.
No, that's okay, Scott.
Oh, that was great.
We're just getting started early.
You know, for us, you know, over the years, we have seen through some of the programs like WhyTry, how we can expedite the relationship building process through, you know, social emotional learning. I remember when we first rolled it out about, you know, 10 years ago, we usually had it twice a week, Tuesday and Thursdays. And then other times we embed into the curriculum, like in ELA and math, some of the principles. But we seen Tuesday and Thursday, we have the greatest traction. We have more students showing up on that day because it was so fun and engaging, and it was, you know, relevant to what was going on in their world, you know, from a psychosocial emotional standpoint. And we've seen the power of having that because we really slow down the process of going right into the curriculum the first, 6 weeks. We onboard the students and we build a sense of community with the students. So it's the same type of deal this year. We're not going to smash them with the curriculum. We're going to actually build relationships up front. And what we've seen when we had those relationships built, it was easy to actually get them in the back end. When we made this shift, we had connections with the students, so it wasn't really hard to actually support them. Now, what we had to do is actually build out what we call a family academic support team, which is a non-academic support team, members going out to the homes with masks and gloves, of course, and helping them, actually adjust to this online way of learning. This year, we can actually jumpstart that. We actually are doing PDs for families and students over the summer and actually paying them for doing that. Actually using food, gift cards to actually set up a time to go to the home and actually train or have them attend some webinars or some PDs. We're doing different things to actually engage the families as well. So this is actually a whole team approach. It's not just the school and the family academic support team. We're actually training the parents as well as the students. So, I think, when you talk about what's going on, first with COVID-19 and then what's going on right now with the riots and everything, the students need somebody to lean on. Now, I know just talking with my team members in supervision, it's hard for them. So the adults, they need, emotional support as well. So how do you take care of yourself before you even take care of our students? And that's one thing we are focusing on, trauma-based, training, and also doing some, psychosocial emotional supports, for the team members. So, and we know that, this is going to be key to actually, start off strong next year. So SEL is going to be everything. If you don't have, those psychosocial emotional supports in place for your team and for your students and the family, it's like skating uphill. It's not going to work. So you have to have that in place.
Appreciate that. Yeah, in fact, piggybacking off of what Early just said then, let me throw this towards Dave and Scott then, because Early kind of just referenced it. What do we need to do, or what can we do as leaders to be better prepared come the fall to help not just the students, but the adults that we're working with and that are working maybe for us or with us? Any ideas? Because I think Early's right in the sense that, gosh, it's not just about all of the stuff that the students are going to be struggling with, but all the people we work with are facing a lot of the same challenges that the kids are. Any thoughts?
You want to go, Scott?
Well, I'll just jump in and say the first thing is we have to be willing to give everybody the grace for some time to recover. Our principals have been reporting longer hours than they've ever worked before, more stress. They spend all day long in Zoom meetings, jumping from classroom to classroom to classroom at parent meetings. And then when they get off their last Zoom of the day, they have 500 emails sitting in their inbox because they haven't been able to do email all day. That's the kind of pace that they've been running. Well, at the same time, carrying that uncertainty of, are we going to be able to have a graduation? What about kindergarten graduation? What about 8th grade parent night? What, all these sorts of things on top of all the questions around, will there be sports in the fall? And will marching band happen? And what's, they're being put in the middle of answering all these questions. So there's a huge emotional toll on our leaders. So my first thing would be, let's give them time, space to recover and recharge. That is so important. They need to be able to balance right now and recover during the summer because it's going to be a brutal summer as we look to rebuild.
Some of the things that Scott talked about there, we had principals that were coming in at 5 in the morning, helping prepare lunches that were going out on bus routes, and then completing a full school day. And then everywhere they went in the evening, they were asked questions of what was going to happen. And so there just wasn't any rest there. Some of the things that I think helped us the most that we can build on as we go forward were home visits. Early alluded to them earlier in his comments, but we had some principals that we hadn't made contact with those students or with that family. They weren't logging on. Teachers couldn't contact them. And so our administrators made home visits and made that connection and asked them what the problems were and if they could mediate some of those and help them. And a lot of those students immediately come back online, and we were able to address their needs and be able to help them. But the biggest part of that whole thing is building that educational team and communicating with them. I think, you know, that's probably been one of our failures in education, is our communication. And through this period, the last little while, we've had to have that communication individually with parents and with students to be able to make this work and to be successful.
And just one thing, Corey, I know, you know, you guys have one, you know, one of the principals is plugging in. And we've seen that the teachers or the team members that actually collaborated, you know, before March, they were able to like reach out to other, you know, team members for support. So say, for example, you know, the dean is one of the support people that went out to the home. These people didn't, you know, they didn't have a problem calling the dean just off the cuff. Hey, I'm looking for this student. I haven't seen him in my classroom. Could you just do a wellness check? Those team members that were a little more introverted and gun shy about plugging in or leaning on a teammate or collaborating, you know, didn't do as well as far as the engagement and getting those students in, our students in. So I think, you know, the relationship thing is a big, you know, a big component of how this whole thing is going to lay together. We have to do it together. We can't do it in silos. Some people choose to work in silo, but we can't do it in silos any longer. It's going to take a whole team approach. And the only way that's going to happen is just what Dave just said, via communication. If we're not communicating with one another, students going to fall through the cracks. So we have to have the courage to lean on one another, and not just for support with dealing with students, just to actually have somebody to bounce, you know, the way you're feeling. You know, hey, I just need you to, you know, listen to me. You know, we have a lot of team members that do that, or, you know, just set up a Zoom call and we all come together and we have fun, just lighthearted meet and greets, you know? So I think that makes everything worthwhile when you can build a relationships as a team, and then also, you know, lean on your teammate outside the work, you know? That has worked for us.
Thank you, gentlemen. So all three of you have talked at length, or at least referenced relationships and how important they are. And several of you have referenced, even within the WhyTry organization, how we emphasize the importance of relationships. And, you know, that's what we consider to be one of our 3 R's. And after being a teacher and a principal, I mean, I recognize that as educators, we've heard about this idea of how important relationships are our entire careers, right? Like it's not necessarily a new concept. And some of you you've already referenced different ways to some actual ideas of what you could do to build those relationships. So before we move on from relationships, I guess I just want to throw out there, and it's kind of a broad question, but since the world's completely changed, right, in the last 3 months, and our nation has changed in the last 3 months, is there anything else you would like to say about relationships with regards to what role relationships play in education in comparison to maybe what we all understood relationships to mean before? Is there anything else that you think needs to be said as a message regarding relationships? And I'm going to give you a moment to think about that. I did want to say one thing because I saw a question in the chat window by several people, and this idea of, I think it was when Scott was talking, and he was talking about the importance of relationships with students, but one of them said, you know, well, how do I develop a relationship with online, right? Like Like that seems a lot harder to do in the classroom, person to person, you're face to face. That's more natural to develop that relationship. If we end up going to a blended, or if, there's a spike and suddenly I'm doing 4 months online or something like that, how do I nurture that relationship? And there are definitely strategies out there. We talk about some strategies. We coined the term surrendering the one up. And we put forth some ideas of how you can surrender the one up with kids and youth via online. But I guess the one thing I would throw out there to keep in mind to everybody who's out there listening is that the youth are a lot more comfortable than we are online and with technology. They are very used to having relationships online. And so if you're wondering if you're actually getting through and connecting with students online, and if they take anything from it, I would say, oh, they're taking something from it. Checking in with them online is just as important doing it in person, because they're used to that. That's a normal thing for them. We probably need to get over our own fears and realize it's a lot more important than we may totally understand to connect with them online than we maybe previously had. Just my thought on it. But anything else all three of you would like to say regarding the role relationships play heading into the school year in a new world?
I think community relationship is important as well. We have people that have provided meals to families, people that actually volunteer. Even like this week, we had cap and gowns we gave out to the students. And some of the people in the community, the Nonviolence Institute, they came out and they helped pass the caps and gowns out. They gave students opportunity to come and participate in their panels via Zoom and tell them what opportunities they have for them as far as summer work virtually. They have virtual summer work. Imagine that. So I think, for us, we already, tap into our communities, but I think knowing, just like I said, you can't do it alone. It does take a village. You have to actually tap into all kinds of resources. I only have one counselor on staff this year, but I built into the budget to bring on 2 other people. If I can tap into the community and actually get, from a university, maybe 2 counselors that's actually trying to get some hours in to get their degree, that's what I'm going to do. Right now it's a great need for counseling. So I would venture to guess 3 people is not going to be, they're not going to be enough. I'm going to have to, rely on our universities to actually, get people in to help us out with counseling our students. So I think that's really important if we can tap into those resources.
Yeah, and I would just add that we never talk about relationships as a key thing that we do, right? It's that unspoken thing. When you ask people who their favorite teacher was, they don't cite the algebra lesson that moved them. They talk about the teacher that, knew them intimately, knew what was going on in their life. We can all cite a favorite teacher, coach, administrator, whoever it was. That's all relationships. Let's acknowledge as a system that teachers are mentors, big brothers, big sisters, coaches, fathers, surrogate parents, drug counselors, advocates. I mean, the list goes on and on. Those are the roles that we play in this system. Let's acknowledge that and build around that. Let's say it's okay to do nothing during the first couple of weeks, but just build relationships. Let's say it's okay to not race through a curriculum because the AP test says that we have to have a test in May. Let's abandon some of these things that have handcuffed to a timeline and focus on what we know works, which is relationships.
When we first started, our state gave us a couple of days to prepare. And then a lot of our teachers went in with packets and other type of material and maybe weren't aware of Zoom and Google Meet, and some of those weren't as savvy as they thought they should be. And so they hesitated going into that arena. But I was in one of our schools the first day that there was a Zoom that took place. And it was just amazing to see the excitement of the teacher to be able to see her kids, and the excitement of the students to be able to see their teacher. And so as we talk about relationships not being the same as they are in person, maybe they're a little bit different, but I've never seen Scott in person or Early in person. And we've met several times, and I feel like that we have a relationship there. So I think that they can build that relationship online, and that they can be held accountable. As one of our teachers would ask questions as we talk about our teacher evaluation systems and how they, call on every student and involve every student, and students being have the opportunity to participate. That same thing was available in Zoom. She was able to have those call on each student, assess their understanding, and then be able to move on. One of our schools actually held their traditional schedule. I didn't know how that was going to work, as they went with their traditional bell schedule, but the consistency there helped students, because they knew every day what time that they needed to be on for that specific subject. As you get down into, I have a grandson that's in elementary. He had 4 sessions a day, and he knew exactly what time they came. And as he got into a routine, he was able to get there. I have another student, another grandchild that's in the system, that it wasn't as consistent, and he would miss those sessions because he couldn't remember the time. And so I think consistency has a lot to do with our success there. But I really feel like I'm going to go back to what we stated in the very beginning, that the relationship with the teacher and the accountability that they felt they did not want to let their teacher down. And that's why they made those times, is they knew that someone was going to be checking on them and that they would be missed. Even the kids that we went out and did the home visits with, after we'd expressed our concern for them and their ability to succeed, they felt like that they didn't want to let us down. And that's why they came back in, and that's why they got on the Zoom session. And then we were able to follow up with them later. We talked about our counselors. Our counselors' roles have changed drastically. They still have the same obligations for their responsibilities at school, but now we have lists of kids that are having different problems with getting on. Maybe they need their Chromebook repaired or whatever. Our counselors making contact with them and just asking them questions, letting them know that there is a math tutor at one time or another. Their role has changed drastically, and we send lists to them every day of students that we need double checked on, that the teachers haven't been successful. And then it goes from the counselors to the administration, so that everyone has a contact that we're missing in our classes and our Zooms.
Thank you for bringing that up. I think that leads to an important question. And I know I know right out of the gate that this question, it's a little tougher to answer. And, maybe the answer is, well, we don't necessarily have the answer yet, but let me throw it out there right now. Since I joined WhyTry, I wasn't in the schools this year. But regardless, when all of this hit, I'm obviously, surrounded with educators, and all of my friends are educators or principals or teachers. And as I've interacted with them in my personal life and also within WhyTry and interacted with teachers, probably one of the number one concerns that comes up, and I've seen it come up in the chat window, is I imagine when COVID hit, it was a struggle to figure out, okay, so how do we convert this to online learning, step at a time, try to figure that out. And you were probably teachers and educators were probably able to hit their students that were at school every day and engaging anyway. But what about all of those students that are at risk? And they were at risk at school, and now we go outside of the school walls and we talk about online learning, or we talk about a blended approach, and we talk about even coming back to live learning next year. But they didn't engage at all, and they were taking care of their siblings when mom was at work and never got online, or they don't have internet access. And it sounds like Dave's school district in the rural and others, the service providers provided it, but that didn't necessarily happen everywhere. So the big question here is, do you have any advice, or do you see other leaders that you're working with? What are some of the strategies going into next year to try to keep the gap from widening due to what's happened to us over the last few months?
Corey, I'm gonna hit that one first for you just a little bit.
Yeah.
We're assuming a lot there that kids that are not successful in the traditional school are not going to be successful in a different setting. And we've actually experienced just the opposite. And there was a comment in the chat that, you know, some of the anxiety and stress that was experienced at school was not at home, and kids felt safe. Maybe, you know, all the traditional things that we deal with as administrators weren't there at home, and so they were able to succeed. And we have some that were successful in a traditional school that were not successful, that they were more dependent on the social relationship with their friends and with their teacher, and when they got home in an online setting weren't as successful. And so it brings a whole new gamut of problems, and I think we need to address each one of those individually. But there's a lot of kids that experience anxiety at school that in this online setting did very, very well.
Early, Scott, any thoughts on that?
Well, we are using a CBE model, a competency-based education model, using project-based learning, right? So we're looking at skills. We're not looking at tests, and we're looking at if students are mastering a skill. So, you know, we have career pathways like IT, which we have the CompTIA certs, and then we have coding. So with that, you know, students are actually doing different projects and getting assessed on the skills that they're actually mastering. And that gave us an advantage, you know. So for example, with Fuse, which is the coding program we use, it's already online, right? So the students have the kits that they take home, they had already, and they building these robots using Fuse. And based on their submission of the codes to the teachers, they can actually get, we use Mastery Connect. They can actually get marked for mastering that skills. And it's the same thing with, ELA. It's the same thing with civics. The same thing with humanities. They're doing project-based learning, and it's multidisciplinarian, which means we're using a theme called Good Eats, right? So all that is encompassed in math, English, history, and science. Good Eats is embedded in that. So all the students are working on something that's related to Good Eats. And they're doing projects in English, they're doing projects in math, they're doing projects in social studies that's related to Good Eats. And they're submitting different parts of it, which we call exhibitions of learning. They submit these different mini projects to the teachers, which end up being one big project in the end, and that's how they are graded. So students, they love the fact that they can do some of this stuff from home. So for example, when they're baking a cake, and using these different measurements, and then they show the teacher, via Zoom their projects, and they're showing their classmates, they love it, So I think, our students, they love to do hands-on type stuff. And it has been great for us as far as the virtual experience. And it seemed like we had our diverse learners participate more than they ever did in a school setting.
It's fantastic. That's right up my alley. We could talk a long time offline. Scott, anything else you'd like to share just about that idea of how do we prevent the achievement gap from widening from all of this?
Yeah, two quick thoughts. Early, I hear you. I mean, I was at a restaurant in the east side of our state, and it was a Mexican restaurant. I was watching this young woman run around the restaurant. She was doing everything. I mean, everything from welcoming people to the register to taking orders to delivering food, everything. And I asked her, I said, you don't happen to go to high school around here, do you? And she says, yeah, I'm a full-time student. I go, when do you do your homework? She goes, well, after we close up around here around 9:30, 10:30. And I just thought to myself, you can't tell me that our system can't rebuild itself and give her proficiency credits for all the stuff that everything she's demonstrating nightly running this business, but yet no, she has to go home at night and do 6 classes worth of credit. To me, that was like this pinnacle moment, like, yeah, we need to change. The only other quick thing I'd say is, again, this is our chance to create, and I put this in the chat, we have forced all of our kids and families for decades to go into our system. We put them in, they might make it out. This is our chance to rebuild it, to have districts and schools create a menu of options for families. So for those kids that Dave mentioned that are flourishing at home because they're introverts and they've got the comforts of home, let them stay at home. It's the district's responsibility to build a digital space for them. Those kids that need social learning, let's provide that for them. Those kids that need a blended model, let's provide that for them. And that is all in one district and all in one school and maybe all in one grade level or maybe even all in one classroom. The time is now, and I think if we don't pivot right now, I think we'll lose families to the private system, frankly. They'll be like, okay, public education, you had a chance to change, you didn't do it.
Thank you, gentlemen. You guys are definitely leaders for tomorrow. Great insights. I have 2 more questions for you. You're walking along, you're in the street, you're at the store, you run into parents that you know are either parents of your students at your school or in your district or your organization, and they just kind of de-stress on you a little bit and say, oh man, I'm so worried about the upcoming school year. What advice do you have for parents in the midst of all of this, that they're feeling so many feelings of, because everything's changed for them and what the school system they went through suddenly seems like it's blowing up and turning into something different. And so they feel a lot of anxiety, and some of them are going to be going to work and they're like, well, during COVID, they stayed at home with their kids, but now, they know long-term they have to maybe not be at home. And so they have lots of anxiety. What advice do you have for parents in the upcoming school year that, is great advice for our leaders and educators tuning in that they can also share as parents come to them with just this general idea of anxiety for the future of education?
It's a short, easy one. I'm hoping Dave or Early will take that one first.
It's on you, Scott.
I can start off there. The CDC's given us a bunch of guidelines, and if you look at some of those, such as bus transportation and classroom occupation, they're almost impossible. So we could always worry about those and say, we're going to have to run our bus routes 8 times. Our health department, the relationships that we build within the system, talking to state officials and our local health officials, and then building a plan moving forward. There needs to be a little bit of trust between the systems that we're going to make it work for kids and make it work for our communities. As we've talked about our busing situation, maybe students do have to wear masks on buses where they're in tighter quarters, and maybe in classrooms we do multiple sessions or rotate from teacher to teacher. Those type of things may have to change just a little bit. Scott's talked about change, and as we look at this as an opportunity that was brought up earlier instead of a restriction, I think that we have an opportunity to change and that we can meet some of those. And I don't think that it's totally COVID. Everyone's talked about that our teachers, that our students bring the flu. It's a place to transmit sickness all the time. And so some of the things we're learning from this are going to help us to have better hygiene and create a better environment for everyone as we move forward. And so as you're talking to those parents, I think your communication, the different venues, the social media, the radio, those type of things, you need to have a plan ready for them. But this changes so fast that plan may change tomorrow, and just realize that there are people that are going to, education is our #1 priority. That's what we're going to be working on. Convenience for their student and safety for all those involved. And as we move forward, those should be our goals.
Early?
Oh, okay. So we're moving away from seat time, right? We have 300 minutes in a day that the students have to be in a seat learning, right? We're moving away from that. And one thing we want to, one, give the family voice and choice in their education, right? They have a choice and the voice, how they want their students to be educated. And I already heard from some parents that they don't want their kids to go back in the fall. So with that, we have a track for that type of student, right? That student will have what they have right now. It's purely virtual learning that's going on. And we use the same thing, onboarding at the beginning of the year, both the parent and the student. The second part is we are slowing down the pace. The third component is letting them know that, you know what, you have these wraparound services that you're going to have and you can expect to have to actually see you through the first 6 to 8 weeks. And that's one thing we learned at K-12 when I was working for that company, that it took us really 6 to 8 weeks to get parents and students adjusted or acclimated to being in a virtual setting. And it was about the same thing with teachers when they made that shift. It took them about 6 to 8 weeks to get the gist of navigating throughout the curriculum. So again, we're trying to do that a little bit earlier, an intro to online learning for all the students and family, because even with those that's coming back into the building, it's going to be a staggered schedule. So it's going to be a schedule from 9 to 12, 12:30 to 3:30, and then from 4 o'clock to 7 o'clock. And that schedule is going to be staggered, and the parents can decide, if the students want to come there, the first session, the second session, the third session, and give them the choice when they want to do that. And then the other part is they're working offline to do their projects. But really, it's about letting them know that they have these supports in place and they're not doing it alone. And actually sticking to it and seeing that through. Not just talking about it, but actually being about it and showing them that you're walking through this with them. I think that would provide some kind of security. And I think for us, getting back to the parents, when they call us within, 5 minutes, that has been good. Getting back to emails, I mean, sometimes it's hard because you're doing so much, but you have to get back to them within a reasonable time. It's not the next day. And our parents appreciate us for that. We have close to 100 people graduating tomorrow. And it wasn't just the team that did that, it was the parents that were engaged making it happen, as well as our community partners.
Excellent. Scott.
I like to introduce myself to people in the grocery store as a hopeologist, and they always look at me funny. But I think every educator right now has the responsibility to be a hopeologist. We need to speak hope to our kids and our families and our parents that, yes, this was a blow to what what you were used to, but I would say what they were used to was broken. And we now have a chance to come back and build a system that addresses all of the gaps. And I think as a parent, I would love to know that my school is going to fix the access gap, the opportunity gap, the technology gap, the relationship gap, the hope gap, the expectation gap. I mean, there's this big long list of gaps that we've never kind of like systemically addressed. And as a parent, I would love to hear that. I would love to know that all of the leaders in the school system are busy working on this new future that's bright for kids.
Awesome. Okay, gentlemen, one last question, and I'm going to preface it. It's going to be on hope because the title of our webinar here was Relationships and Hope, Ensuring Success in the New Now. And so I want to ask a question about hope. Before I get there, though, I just kind of want to sum up what I've been hearing you share for the people who are attending the webinar a little bit. But, we talk about ensuring success in the new now. And some of the things that I've heard you say, if I was to summarize it, is that number one, this is a great time to embrace that there is a new way to do things. Why not take this opportunity to realize that things can look different and that's okay. And not only that, it could be better. Dave brought up the fact that some of these kids that struggled in school, now they're doing great learning from home. And now this is a new opportunity to embrace different modes of learning, and there's a lot of opportunity in the wake of this difficulty. And I hear you all saying as well that, you know, part of that is working together as educators, as well as reaching out and communicating with your community partners, and that the relationship that we talk about is not just about your relationship with your students, but it's also your relationship with your colleagues and parents and community partners and organizations out there. And then, of course, we've talked quite a bit about how important relationships are, and that they are really paramount, and that it's no longer just an unspoken thing, Scott, but it is something that needs to be one of the critical components of what we do, and it needs to be thought out and really looked at. So with that in mind, the one thing that I really want to talk about now then is hope. And my question is simple. What gives you the biggest hope for the future in education moving forward with everything that's happened? What do you look at and think, you know what, this is why I'm hopeful for the future? What do you think, guys? Who wants share your last thoughts on that?
I'll go.
Thank you, Early.
So I love the fact now we have to personalize education, because one side never fit, one side fit all. That was never a good model, right? So I'm hopeful that, this model of learning from afar, it works, because I have seen it work over the last 10 years working for K-12, that virtual education company. And, I said this before, I know we met sometimes offline. There are a lot of resources out there that is research-based that shows the efficacy of the, virtual learning and how to engage students. It's out there. And you have to, tap into those resources and actually use it to your advantage. I mean, this is the time to do that. So I'm optimistic about the future, because I know now that everyone is now forced to really individualize learning. And I don't think that was really going on prior to this pandemic.
Excellent. Dave, do you want to take it away? What gives you the biggest hope moving forward?
Early hit it right on. We've been a mastery, doing the transition to mastery the last couple of years, and individualized learning, personalized learning. And I think this is a huge opportunity. The things that we've been training for came to pass, and we were able to, all at once, it became, paramount in the efforts that we were making, rather than something that you did when everything else was complete. But the biggest takeaway that I have from this whole thing is that I work with wonderful people, and they're able to adapt and change. And the difference that they've made in the last 3 months was just phenomenal. The relationships that were built between teachers and bus drivers and principals and classified staff that they hadn't had the opportunity to work together before. Some of those opportunities came because of COVID, and we had different groups that were putting lunches together in the mornings, others that were putting lesson plans and packets together for students. I had one bus driver that took his own vehicle and made the route, and the kids that weren't taking advantage of some of the resources that we were, lunches and things like that we were distributing, made sure that they knew that they could take part in that. And I just, that's the biggest thing, is we work with great people. We have a wonderful job, and our ability to adapt and change. And we've talked about how hard it is to change education, but the last three months we've done amazing things. And it was because of a pandemic and because we had to, but now we know we can, and we do need to, going forward, do just exactly what Scott said, make it so that it's personalized, so it meets the needs of the students. Thank you, Dave. Scott, last words about hope.
Yeah, just quickly again, I'm a hopeologist, so that's the best place for me to live in. I'm hopeful that every kid will wake up, and I'm talking about each and every child will wake up every morning and be hopeful about the school system that they're going to attend, that I put in quotes, whether that's virtual, blended, or totally face-to-face, or some variation. I'm hopeful that that same student will be able to go through a system that's equitable throughout the entire system, that they have access to great programs. I'm hopeful that all of us adults, thanks to recent events in our society, are going to examine some of the racist institutions that have existed as barriers for decades. I'm hopeful that we'll no longer have the SAT required as a prevention to keep kids from getting into college. I mean, I'm hopeful that we will tackle a lot of these big P policies that have really prevented all of our kids from being successful. So I just got lots of hope. I just see this as a tremendous opportunity, and I'd rather live with that excitement than the uncertainty of what lies ahead.
Awesome. Gentlemen, Early, Dave, and Scott, thank you so much for joining us on the webinar. We appreciate it.
Hey, thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Okay.